reveille, donks.
Look at us now, tip to tip. This is our life. This is our passion. That's the spirit we bring to this show.
I'm Luke Thomas.
I'm Brian Campbell.
This is Morning Kombat.
Oh, yeah. You used to hear that sound a lot, right? Yeah. The show that used to be the best damn thing that ever happened to you is back. Promises made and promises kept. Hey, Luke Thomas, let's make Morning Kombat great again. We're back Monday, February 12th, 2024. Hey, guys, it's fight week, UFC 298, Anaheim, California, and an absolute banging of a pay-per-view main card that we're about to serve up. LT, your boy BC, Brian Campbell right here. And Luke Thomas, while it's been a long time since you and I have rock and rolled in these parts, to come back together and to get people, hopefully, anywhere close as to fired up as you are right now for Volk versus Topuria, I'm here. Let me be your gateway drug. Let's bang.
Let's bang, yeah. Chewy. Let's bang Chewy. Let's bang everyone in between. Yeah, man. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all out there again. I hope everything's going well. So, yes, we are here to talk about UFC 298 because, BC, here's the great part about 298. Even if the rest of the card were a Apex-style card, we would be groaning about that. But what you could at least say is, hey, that main event is top shelf. It's just A+, first class, the whole 9 yards. But the good news is that's actually not the overall case. Yes, that main event is, in fact, very, very good. BC, this main card is absolutely excellent, top to bottom. The preliminary card has a couple of bright spots on it, but it's not that great. This main card, to me, top to bottom, I love it. So many good fights, so many great storylines. A lot to look forward to for Saturday's pay-per-view.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
About it. I'm here to tell you that Mikey Bormal of CBS Sports is on the ones and twos on this program, and you can go to morningkombat.store. Yes, even during our hiatus right now to check out our latest merch. I believe there's a deal on hats. Tell RJ Dunkel Gangbang that your boy BC sent you. So damn fired up for this card. And look, I don't want to tell celebrities how to live their lives. I mean, we are, less than 12 hours removed from gotta be honest here, a freaking badass Super Bowl that went into overtime that had maybe the best halftime show that I've ever seen, Luke. Yeah, I said these things out loud. So I don't want to tell Tom Brady, Charles Barkley, and Travis Scott how to live their life, but I think they picked the wrong Zuffa event going to Power Slap the other night. They should be in Anaheim this Saturday for 298 because damn the torpedoes, damn the 300 main event. 298 has got it going on,
299 is a great card. 300, we don't have any updates about it. There was no Super Bowl commercial announcing any kind of Hail Mary, so I guess the Hail Mary thing is passed. But again, the 298 main card, man, it's just full of excellency. Whether or not Charles Barkley is being paid to attend people slapping in front of them who probably need that for gas money to get home that night. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
I'll freaking dare you. Were you not entertained by Usher? I mean, the guy.
So here's what I would say. Okay. I mean, you didn't just say you were entertained by Usher. What you said was it's the best one you've maybe ever seen. And I'm like, dude, we live in a world where we saw Shakira and J-Lo up there. Like, do you have the temerity to really argue that Usher was better than that?
I have the temerity. I've got bushels of temerity. I'll tell you that much. What I'll tell you is
you are out of your mind.
It was one of those situations where I actually missed the first half of the game. I walked back into the house. My wife and kids were watching, like, hey, halftime show. And, they're really into it because that's their thing. I'm not an Usher guy, or at least I didn't think I was. Dude, that was like Elvis, Michael Jackson level command. And then you take into account the stamina necessary to deliver that performance and then getting all handsy with Alicia Keys as if there's something going on there. I mean, this was start to finish a superstar effort. So I remember the Shakira thing. I remember you loving it. A lot of people loving it. It wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I don't usually pop for these halftime shows. I feel like they're a mess. There's a lot of people jumping in and out. For whatever reason, Luke, last night, it worked. And Usher in my mind just went from that guy that I think I know to like, oh man, maybe I should be modeling my life after this guy, Luke. I mean, that was like Jordan holding the hand up against the Jazz in Game 6 in '98. I mean, that was right? Or I guess I'm making this up. Apparently I'm making this up. All right.
I mean, I just don't understand how like Prince can perform a halftime special and you think Usher's is better than Prince. Like, how is that possible? I thought it was good. I thought it was good. I liked it. I definitely, absolutely liked it. I thought he put on a good show. I have nothing critical really to say about it, but I just, in the pantheon of all-time great Super Bowl halftime performances, Jesus, this wouldn't be top 5, maybe not even top 10. I mean, what are we talking about?
1. Did you not notice the effort that man gave? But all right, enough of that, Luke.
And hold on, the last thing on the game itself. Okay, the ending, it got better at the end. I mean, there's no denying that. But dude, for 3 quarters, that game sucked the horn. That game was awful for the first 3 quarters.
I watched the second half in OT with my son, had a great father-son bonding moment, and I was entertained. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I just want to say, the first 2 quarters, horrendous football, like not good at all. So just that's it.
There you go. There it is. Whoom. There it is. But we're here for 298, so let's get into it. Anaheim, California, as I mentioned, this Saturday. And boy, we're talking about royalty in this main event. We're talking about the greatest featherweight champion in the history of this sport, Alexander Volkanovski, literally a living legend right now. But entering, here's what makes this matchup and this card great. He's entering arguably the toughest fight of his entire reign, and he could not be entering with more questions, fresh off the head kick knockout loss on short notice against Volkanovski. I'm sorry, against the number 1 pound for pound Makhachev in their last fight for the lightweight title. And obviously it makes things different when Topuria is riding such an incredible hot streak that, Luke, you have been teasing for months now that when people said, hey, gun to your head, I know we're 4 months out from 298. Like, who's going to win this? Who's going to be the next champion? The fact that you've got that level of belief in Topuria gets me even extra excited, because nobody believed in Volkanovski more on this ride, on this journey to where we are than you. Yet here he is at age 35, and the vaunted Luke Thomas supported in Patriarch's death stat that nobody beyond Tyron Woodley after 35 in men's MMA, welterweight or below, can win a title match. Boy, is he going to put that to the test here against the toughest matchup available. When I ask you outright, from a macro view, what gives you that confidence to tease that this might be Topuria's moment? What do you tell me about his rise and his journey up to this point?
Well, like everything else, it's context dependent, right? So let's back up a step. If these two guys, Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria, had they been scheduled to fight, let's say even just a year ago, right? Would I have been as eager or even outright picked Topuria to beat Volkanovski? Probably not. No. I think it actually required the right amount of time, the right context for things to build to this point. And I want to be very, very clear about this. When we're talking about Alexander Volkanovski, we're talking about one of the best fighters to ever do it. I don't know where all of his... Will he be on MMA's Mount Rushmore? Will folks consider him, BC, to borrow one of your metaphors, at the head table of the all-time greats? His career's not done, but I think even with what he's achieved now, it would be hard for me to see that he wouldn't be considered an all-time great. However, he is an all-time great at 35. And I don't bring that up just to be like, oh, it's the stat again, but I am saying, just to remark, he is at an age where we know he is almost certainly out of his athletic prime, right? The prime is usually 31, 32, 33. You're now at 35 years of age. You are outside of that. Now, of course, he's going to build that up with, tactical awareness and strategic prowess, and he's got tons of experience, and that's all going to help him as well. But he's also coming off of a head kick KO loss, granted up a weight class under less than ideal circumstances. And more to the point, you're asking about Topuria, what have I seen? You could tell that Topuria from his early UFC days was very, very skilled. But what you had a harder time noticing was, at first, well, was he built for greatness? But his improvement, BC, has been rapid, right? This is a guy that primarily was a grappler kind of first. He got his jiu-jitsu black belt, I think, a few years ago, and began to build out the rest of his game kind of around that. The fact that we barely even associate that with him now, I think, kind of tells you about the development of his game. By the way, even then when he would begin to strike, it was a little bit more of that sort of bladed karate style, and now he's much more of just a boxer. He has found his own identity, and through that, what I have noticed is foundationally, he has many of the skills you need. He is a very good athlete overall. He now has 5-round experience. But the big issue for me, BC, is what does the youth confer besides speed, besides, a belief in his own sense of things as it relates to, confidence. He's never lost, all that stuff. That's all great. But the thing that really I come back to here is I believe that over time, Volkanovski could hurt someone like Topuria. But I think Topuria needs hardly any opportunity at all, barely, and he can absolutely wallop Volkanovski. He hits harder. His ground and pound is absolutely savage. His hand speed is ridiculous, right? He can do so many things with physical intent in a way where it's a bit more of a slow bleed process with Volkanovski. So what does that mean, BC? In the end, when you combine the age of Volkanovski and the miles and what that does to his game with the conditions he came to us in off that head kick KO. Granted, I'm not saying he's going to be like, oh, completely wounded from it, but I don't think we can discount it either. And then you add in the development of Topuria's game with the final note being what the margin of error that Volkanovski has in absorbing an errant shot and being able to survive it, I think is much more narrow than a lot of folks might realize.
Well, look, this is the ultimate UFC pay-per-view main event because it's a virtual pick'em betting wise. And you know how, when you can get something that's, you know, minus 100 one way, plus 200 the other way, you feel like a Super Bowl. This, as we look at FanDuel's odds at the moment, minus 120 Volkanovski, your favorite, but Topuria minus 104 right there with him. So it's a virtual pick'em, and it makes a lot of sense when you consider the 27-year-old Topuria 14-0, 6-0 in the UFC, 4 by stoppage. And you look at the path of destruction. I mean, he folded Jai Herbert in half. He nearly forced Bryce Mitchell to openly, I mean, not nearly, he did. He forced Bryce Mitchell to openly consider retirement due to the severity of the beating. And then, like you mentioned, he proves that he's got the 5-round championship stamina against an old warhorse like Josh Emmett, who nobody can go in there confident against. I mean, look what he just did against Bryce Mitchell on short notice. So he earned it. He's here. He's now. The odds show you how great this fight is. But Luke, I got to say this one thing, you know, something about DDP that snuck up on us, Dracus du Plessis, now your middleweight champion, was like Topuria, but maybe a little bit more drastic was his improvement over a short time span in the UFC. But one thing I think we talk about now in hindsight with DDP is, man, look at the star power, the understanding, it's not just the confidence, right? It's the ability to be so comfortable under the lights. It's the ability to execute in situations maybe that you haven't quite earned through experience yet. You got to say the same thing about Topuria. Watching him on the Countdown show, seeing the way he handles himself, his personal life, as you've mentioned many times, he's an outright stud and star in Spain and has the support of the famous footballers, and it is an, you know, a legitimate celebrity there. Dude, he carries himself like that. And sometimes that doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. He expects to go in there and knock out Volkanovski and has said it that much. You're right. He's absolutely a legitimate threat. So you love the idea of him getting the chance against one of the greatest of all time and the greatest in this division's history to truly prove himself on that elite level, while the great one himself, Volkanovski, has to try to do something that Valentina Shevchenko just did, losing your title. Although in this case, Volkanovski didn't lose his featherweight title, but he lost now twice on the title level at lightweight. But then coming right back at the same age as Shevchenko did, and even though she only got a draw against Alexa Grasso in the rematch at UFC Noche, we saw how that 10-8 round, which shouldn't have been, would have given her the win. So the real question here, even bigger in my eyes than is it Topuria's time, is he ready for this, is what can Volkanovski do to go back to the drawing board, to the division in which he's undefeated, to the division in which he's beaten legend after legend. And can he, with a full camp, figure out again how to be Alexander the Great at age 35? Luke, you brought to prominence an interview that was done in the Oceanic region by the upstart site She Loves the Gloves, in which she talked to Eugene Berriman, who's I guess we could say the co-head coach of Alexander Volkanovski, about that short notice decision to take on Makhachev, which, look, you've been very outspoken this entire way in saying that was a bad look. I have to say, I'm surprised to see a couple of things. One, Volkanovski so willingly now saying, look, I was drinking 3 to 4 nights a week when they called me for that fight, and it just was a challenge, and I took it. But that Berriman was strongly against that. So, Luke, we get a lot of MK viewers going, hey, guys, you guys are always praising CKB and Eugene, and rightfully so. But Volk does have a separate coach as well in Joe. What's the guy's name, Luke? Joe what?
Joe Lopez. Joe Lopez.
Excuse me. What do you specifically make of Coach Eugene being so against it in this now ill-fated decision of Volkanovski? I mean, he could end up paying for that. Getting head kicked by the best fighter in the world isn't a great situation for anyone. But if anyone can do the Shevchenko and come back, regardless of age, regardless of situation, it's Volk. But what do you make of his own team, in essence, being like, man, that's a bridge too far? Worked for Ngannou, didn't work for Volkanovski.
Listen, you're going to find short notice guys who are competing under less than ideal circumstances do amazing things. You're going to see it. It has happened in the sport before, and it will happen in the sport again. But the math is simply not on your side. And BC, it's one thing to come back even for less than ideal circumstances on short notice. But let's actually tally up everything that Volkanovski did, right? So short notice, and by the way, very short notice, less than 2 weeks, like 11 or 12 days, like insane short notice, right? Up a weight class, okay? Then he does it against an all-time pound-for-pound guy. He wasn't fighting just any other fighter. He was fighting the guy that was either right below him or right above him, depending on your rankings, in the pound-for-pound slot. Like the guy, basically, he could fight other than himself if he had a clone in the entire sport, right? That's who he was going up against while drinking and not being in the gym at all. By the way, at a pretty advanced age, all things relatively,
and a newborn,
all things being, and a newborn, and everything else
does to your personal life, right?
Oh my God, dude! When Violetta is like the apple of my eye. I love her more than I've maybe ever loved anything in this world. But I didn't sleep for a fucking year when she was born, dude. It was horrible. It was horrible. So like, you can just imagine what that might do to you. So BC, like, really think about, he took on not training, drinking, which is fine. Like I'm not opposed to the drinking per se. I'm just simply saying this is not the readiness that you need for a top pound-for-pound guy. And you might be asking why he took it. Eugene Bareman was pretty clear in that interview that, listen, the UFC came to him and he doubled down on it. He said substantially, and then if you actually read the text, he goes, no, substantially better contract and better money. So he went for the guaranteed cash with a higher amount of cash in order to get this. But BC, the last thing I would say about this, of course, is, what do I make of it? Eugene Bareman's a smart guy. His counsel to not take the fight was probably the right way to do it, but it's in hindsight now. The other thing that sort of stands out here is, can you imagine a world, BC, whether you have Naoya Inoue or Bud Crawford, number one, whoever, where they would take a fight on short notice, and I know they're far apart in weight, but let's say that they're really close, taking a fight, one of the guys takes a fight on short notice against the other guy to get a much better contract. It's unfathomable. It's unfathomable that a pound-for-pound great in boxing would take a short notice fight on that short notice against another pound-for-pound guy up a weight class, having not trained and been drinking all this time. They would never be in that position to begin with. They would have already had a big contract by that point. It's impossible. And so I understand some of the pressures that Volkanovski felt. The good news here, BC, is, for as ill-advised as that decision was, and I think I stand by everything I said, that was a bad decision, competitively anyway, none of those factors appear to be in play for Ilia Topuria. If Topuria is going to beat Volk, he's going to get Volk healthy, off a full camp, having really retooled everything. And by the way, we didn't even bring up Volkanovski's arm surgery that also had him out, right? I mean, all these...
The mental health. He said afterwards it was almost like because he didn't have a fight scheduled, he was getting stressed. There was the cabin fever thing. I'm feeling that this winter. I don't have a trip scheduled. Somebody pull me out of this. I know that.
But you get my point, dude. Isn't it wild? Like, people always make it to be like, oh, guys take fights on short notice. Guys, he was fighting another pound-for-pound great. You cannot handicap yourself that way and expect to beat somebody that good. BC, true or false?
It's true, but isn't it crazy in the UFC's pay structure that somebody that we're already identifying as a living legend and all-time great was willing to sacrifice his first defeat, or not his first defeat, I'm sorry, it was his second straight, but a big defeat in a big spot, potentially for a retirement, potentially for that new restructured contract that ultimately would give him what he deserves. It's a wild indictment on where we are in the pay structure of 2024, but it's the reality. So I was actually watching the Countdown show. They showed the post locker room footage. I'm not sure if this had been previously released, but immediately after that fight, you can see Volkanovski head in his hands, just lamenting the fact that he was drinking 4 nights a week and it was out of character, and he still accepted the fight. To see Coach Craig Jones next to him, who is one of the funniest people on the planet in this MMA space, be so like downtrodden with him, It shows you what the champion went through in that moment. But here we are, full camp. He seems to be back mentally and physically. He's saying the right things. Here we are. He's got arguably the toughest matchup in front of him. So let's talk about the vaunted 35 and over or under stat, however you want to look at it. That, Luke, you said, look, it's the men's MMA game, not the women's. So we're not going to keep Rocky Pennington or Amanda.
I've got an update on that
in this discussion. Well, I wanted to read you a DM I got from a fan who thinks you need to amend the stat in general. First, tell me what you're talking about here.
Well, if you go back in, okay, so there are 3 known cases between 125 and 170 where someone over the age of 35 has won. But let me tell you what those 3 cases are. It is Tyron Woodley versus Darren Till. It is Tyron Woodley versus,
Called it, just for the record on the MMA.
Yes.
By finish, by stuff.
Fair enough. It is Tyron Woodley versus Demian Maia. And then it's Amanda Nunes taking on Irene Aldana. Now, I bring this all up to say, when Woodley fought Till was obviously below the age of 35. I'm not even sure he was 30 at that point, right? He was pretty young. But in the other 2 cases, both Maia and Aldana, the opponent was also over the age of 35. So it leads me to say there has been one fucking time between the men's and women's game where someone who is 35 and over beat someone less than that during a UFC title fight. It's happened positively one time.
Well, it should have happened for Shevchenko. She didn't get the nod. And what you're referencing, I did get a DM from fan Farbad Nematafar in which he laid out that same thing. So, Luke, what this fan Farbad was trying to ask that you just articulated was, we are going to take away then that the Woodley second win because they were both 35 and over. Now we're taking away that women's fight. So, man, that just goes to show you how even more ludicrous. But do you think the Volkanovski commercial that was just put out, which is hilarious, by the way, of him playing an old man and trying to, really have fun with the idea that he's over the hill, that has to be fueled by your stat. It has to be.
I have some reason to believe that it played a role. But I'll say this. I thought Volk took that whole thing in stride, to be perfectly honest with you. I thought the commercial was that's one of the best. Someone said, BC, that they reminded them of old school Sports Center commercials for ESPN. Yes. Isn't that true? I thought that was 100% a great call. That's exactly what it was. But I just want to remind folks, there's this tendency, right, where when math gets a little bit scary, we start to ascribe superstition to it. There is no curse. That's not like, no one has ever said it's a curse. We just said, guys, if you get this old and you fight competition this good for this kind of a prize, it's an uphill climb. That's all we're saying. It's a fucking uphill climb. Many have tried. When the other opponent is less than 35, one guy in one instance has succeeded. Now, the common response I get when I bring that up is, hey, well, if anyone can do it, it's Alexander Volkanovski. Fair enough. We're talking about a guy who was one of the most technical fighters I've ever seen. One of the most strategic, thoughtful, technical fighters that, irrespective of weight class, the game has ever been privileged to see. That is 100% true. But it is also true that the math is not, we didn't, put a potion together to get it going. No one sprinkled magic curse dust on top of it. It's just observed reality. It just tells you nothing is ironclad. But if you are over the age of 35 and you are trying to defend a UFC title, and by the way, pop quiz, BC, how old is Ilia Topuria?
27. 27
years of age, a 27-year-old undefeated hammer. It is going to be an uphill climb. And I think that is a very, very, very fair way to put it.
If you've been following this show long enough, it has to be, even with all those great stats and trends mentioned, it has to be shocking that you would potentially pick against Volkanovski. But the thing about Topuria is he does echo a lot of the things that you love about life. Luke, he was born to a country that he doesn't claim, Germany, which, knowing you as my Indian co-host, I can understand that. He also fell in love with Spain, as you did that time you went to Madrid and became a super fan of that football club. So, maybe I understand it, Luke. He seems to like Latin women too, based on the Countdown show. So maybe this is like, if Luke Thomas
I understand this man very much. Let me just tell you
that's what I'm saying. Maybe that's it. All right.
And by the way, By the way, the guy who, so I rewatched the Emmett fight. The guy who was there in attendance, the famous footballer you mentioned, is Sergio Ramos, who played for Real Madrid and is, for a time, I believe, was captain of the Spanish national team. So we have many things in common that we like. Yes, that's true.
Is Real Madrid in Serie A, Luke?
No, Serie A would be Italy. It would be Italy. So the Spanish league is La Liga, the league.
Oh, La Liga. Okay, so not as racist as Serie A is, where you would normally.
Oh, very, very racist. Actually,
right.
La Liga's had a real bad year of racism. Actually, yeah.
All right, we'll move on from that. All right. Let's talk about 6 fights for Topuria in the UFC up to this point. But as I identified, they've been amazing. Has he fought anything or seen anything that could prepare him for Volkanovski?
No, nothing. There's this common argument that we get all the time, and it's a good one for the most part. People overstate it, but it's a good one, which is, hey, what has Topuria done against someone of a high caliber that would even approximate what Volkanovski has done, right? If you just look at the guys Volkanovski has beaten Max 3 times, and the last of which was very authoritative, just running the table on Yair Rodriguez, running the table on Brian Ortega. Well, I mean, I was back and forth for a little bit, but you get the idea. In the end, he gave him a real beating. Korean Zombie was just completely out of his depth. I mean, it was a whole thing. No, he hasn't done anything like that. I mean, obviously that win over Josh Emmett is really, really good. Maybe you could put that on par with some of the other good but smaller wins that Volkanovski has in his title reign. But certainly the point stands that the level of accomplishment that Volkanovski has reached, Topuria simply has not. Just matter-of-factly, not at all. And I really believe, if you look at the guys, this is more towards what you're asking, if you look at the guys that Topuria has fought, to what extent are some of them, are their games reminiscent of a guy like Volkanovski? No, not really. Not many of them. My individual pieces, maybe here or there, but not really. Volkanovski is one of one. He's his own guy, and there really is no getting around that. Not just because he has a unique sort of frame and a unique kind of game, but he makes adjustments between rounds, BC, right? This is a guy who can show you one thing and then show you another and then show you another, and it just gets worse for you over time. So in that sense, no, I don't think he's seen anything quite like it. If you're going to pick Topuria, BC, let's just be honest about it, and I will. I expect him for maybe potentially long stretches of the fight to either not be doing great or be behind the 8 ball or, not really getting his game going. And I will also tell you that if you're picking Topuria, you're partly doing it on a projected idea of what he could be. It's interesting, BC. We have talked many times about what it means to be 35 years old, but you'll recall many times on this show, we have also talked about what it means to be 27. We talked about with Marvin Vettori. I know he had a bit of a relapse recently, but when he turned 27, we saw how much better he was actually getting. We had talked about that specifically. Here we have another case of a guy like 27. Let me just say it very clearly. If you're 27 years old and you're as good as Ilia Topuria is, you're going to see a different guy every time he gets out there. The level of improvement that someone can show with that amount of a foundational base, those kinds of athletic gifts, and his work, he appears to be a hard worker in the gym. When you put that together, you're going to get a different guy every time. What I really come back to is I just don't think Volkanovski is going to be able for 25 minutes to keep Topuria from landing something that he can every time recover from. I don't believe that. I believe eventually he's going to connect and it's going to be too much.
Well, I'll have to say the only time I was in the arena for a Topuria fight was the Ryan Hall finish, which came on the undercard of Poirier-McGregor 3 back in 2021. And the thing I'd take from watching in the first press row so closely was, dude, the patience that he showed as Ryan Hall was exhibiting in some ways a negative style, pulling guard, trying to do anything to lure him into the trap. You could see a little frustration, but it never affected his poise, his pace, his plan of attack. And when it came time to finally break through and finish, he knocked him out cold. So just absolutely nasty. But look, if we say the obvious when somebody has so much experience on this level, and that's Volkanovski, he's 13-0 in the UFC in the featherweight division, unbeaten overall throughout his career at 145. We have to do the flip side, though. Even though Volkanovski has beaten a bevy of all-time greats, from Aldo to Holloway 3 times to whomever. I mean, when he fought Yair, as you mentioned, no one was more dangerous at that moment. Ortega nearly submitted him. God, he's been through the wars. Has he actually fought anybody with the same dynamic combination of not just explosiveness, but technique, game plan, savvy, backbone that we are assuming Topuria will be able to have. Because as you mentioned, you're going to have to use the eye test a bit and assume, can Topuria level up on the 5-round championship title level against a guy this great? Has Volk fought somebody this specifically dangerous in your eyes?
This one actually, I think, favors Volk again a little bit too. There are big differences, but I do think it's fair to say that the Chad Mendes fight is pretty close. It is relevantly close. How about that, right? It is relevant enough that we should take something from that. He's, got a different body type, but bit of a box-heavy guy.
Version. I got to interrupt you. That's an aftermarket version who he retired in that fight, correct?
Yes, but remember, Mendes also dropped Volkanovski in that fight with a hard punch. Sure. So I think, that kind of the kind of guy who could sit you down with a punch, who is boxing heavy, who's a little bit on the front foot, who's forward pressure. By the way, what's the takedown defensive rate of a guy like Ilia Topuria? It's 92%. So, a guy who's got, I wouldn't call him a wrestler per se, but he's got very good defensive wrestling skills. And Topuria is more than that, because as you've seen, he can pass guard. He's got tremendous ground and pound. He can do everything he needs to on the ground in that way. But there is some similarity there. However, folks might say, okay, yes, Volk got dropped, but he rallied and finished off Mendes. Number one, that's true. And number two, the Volk who got dropped against Mendes, from a technical standpoint, I think the current Volk is much, much better, right? I mean, those are not the same guys. So I do think that, listen, dude, Volk has gone up against, in as much as he could have during his era, different body types, different games, different specialties. He had a kicking tornado guy in Yair. He had a guy who was kind of limited in the boxing stand-up, but just lights out danger with the submission attempts in Brian Ortega. He had to fight Max fucking 3 times to get past that, dude. 15 fucking rounds with Max Holloway. Like, just compute that.
In the rematch. Got dropped twice in the rematch.
And to your point, had to rally in the rematch basically in order to win. Like, dude, he has seen it all. That's not the point. The point is not, has he seen some kind of danger that is relevantly close to Ilia Topuria? Yes, of course he has. The question is the state he is in today, not unprepared, but weathered, older, down a tick. Is that still going to be enough against someone who is at the dude, Topuria is not even at the peak of his powers yet, but he is gaining momentum very, very quickly. Will that be enough? That is the central question.
Luke, off topic, but I thought of it in the moment. I'm, of course, wearing the Average Joe Art crossover Arnold Allen Pacers Gym Father We Love Steroids t-shirt that I was blessed to have mailed to me by the AAA Arnold Allen himself. I want to say Average Joe Art obviously did a crossover with us. He's working for a lot of people. He's now doing the work with Kelvin Gastelum, one of my favorite fighters ever, and I really love the look. What do I have to do to get Brian Ortega and Average Joe Art Romero together to make magic? You know what I mean?
The thing that you've been wanting to do for many years, BC, and that's blow Brian Ortega.
Okay, that is neither here nor there on the CBS show, please. Okay, I don't believe in that stuff at all. Wow, all right, enough off topic here. Look, I just don't think, though, he has fought somebody exactly like Topuria, which is why, along with the age, which maybe makes the matchup a little bit closer on paper, it's why we are at the spot not really knowing. All right, Topuria can handle himself on the ground very well. You mentioned the takedown defense, first of all, but his ground and pound, his patience, he could submit you too. Volk leveled up with the wrestling in the first Makhachev fight. How do you see the grappling playing a role in this fight?
That's a big question. That's a great question. That's a huge one. I've really gone back and forth on this. So if you're team Volk, how do you want to play that, right? Because he has tremendous takedown defense as well, Obviously, his numbers are 70%, but okay, he's battle-tested in a way that I think Topuria is not as battle-tested as Volkanovski. So, but, he does have very, very good takedown defense too. So do you want to initiate it? If you do, what are you worried about necessarily if you do actually get him down? Are you worried about his guard? I don't think Topuria's guard is what you would really have to worry about in the way that you would have to worry about it with Ortega, like his guard. But I don't think as well that Topuria is going to play a game from guard. He would probably try to wrestle up or get up or reverse or go to the back. And then you are playing with a little bit of fire there. Like, in other words, I'm not saying it's easy to ground and pound Ortega. What I am saying is Ortega's going to be willing to play from guard in a way that would make ground and pound a wider available option than Topuria is going to play. If you're going to hold Topuria down, dude, you got to hold him down. You're going to have to use your hands and your hips and your legs to do everything to tie this guy down. You're really not going to get substantial ground and pound from that. So, like, I don't understand how it might play a role. And if you're Topuria, yes, if it goes to the ground and you get taken down, I think he'll be able to wrestle his way up. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, does he want the takedown? Does he want to go for it against a guy? Does he want to do it and then work his way to the back, right, with just locked hands, and then begin to use that as a way to manipulate his weight and potentially sink a hook and then do kind of like a slow Khabib thing? Does he want to do that too? I don't know. I would tell you that I do believe that the wrestling will play some kind of role, but both guys, I would imagine, probably feel like their best chance of winning. While Volkanovski might want to mix in takedown attempts, he's probably going to want to play the distance game here a little bit, right? Leg kicking, circling, making a guy like Topuria turn to follow him. That's going to make it very difficult. If you go back and listen to the Emmett fight, you can hear Emmett's corner say, make him turn when you go to your right, because he has to reset all the time. I suspect you're going to see a lot of that from Volkanovski. I just don't believe the wrestling will be absent, BC, but unless someone gets really hurt, I don't see it as the most relevant thing. I think both guys are going to want to mostly use their hands. Or
yeah,
feet,
we do have to remember, I'm not sure how many out there know this, that Volkanovski did once play rugby professionally at 215 pounds. Coach Craig Jones did call him on the Countdown show, pound for pound, the strongest grappler he's ever messed around with, saying,
right,
yeah, he's a featherweight and we're all bigger than him, but he gives us rounds. He makes us work. So that is interesting. Luke, I'm just feeling like, it's not just if anybody can do it, Volk can. I mean, that's true. But I feel like there is the extra motivation to do the almost forgot. Like, there really is. He knows he screwed up, or maybe in the long run, it's not a screw up. I want to be honest with you. Maybe that was worth the money. Maybe that was worth in that moment for him to take that head kick to get that out of the system. You just never know long term, as much as that feels like, how could you say that about a 35-year-old man who just got head kicked by the best fighter in the world? I just think he can do it, Luke. Topuria is dangerous as shit. But I have to say, how many times have we seen Volk bend but not break, find himself in very extremely disadvantageous positions and swim in the deep end, live embracing the suck? I mean, look, you've said I wanted to do unspeakable things to Okamoto and Ortega, the two O's, and I don't show this O face for anybody. So, okay. But wait, what was my transition there about? I don't even remember the setup. Anyway, I think Volk can do this. Look, I'm going to go on the record right now. I'm going to take the old guy to buck the trend, just like I was the only one picking Woodley to finish Till on the MMA beat, and I stand by that. Just like I was the only one who said Francis will wrestle against Gane.
I don't think I picked Darren Till. I'm pretty sure that's not true.
Okay, but you didn't come out and say absolutely he's a fraud and he's going to get finished. Okay, that's more or less.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. That definitely didn't say that. That's true. That's true.
I'm going to tell you, Volk's going to pull this off over 5 rounds, and it won't be easy. He's going to get knocked down. There's going to be, moments where Topuria is going to show us his magic. I'm going to go the old guy. Do you think UFC, though, wants this potential breakout star in a new, fresh, vibrant, passionate market like Spain? Are they cheering for Ilia?
Do they want the guy who's close to 40, or do they want the guy who's close to 30?
Oh, stop. He's 35, Luke. It's the new, 25 in the world.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like, people are like, what does the UFC want? Well, they win no matter what, right? They win no matter what. Having a guy like Volk beat Topuria and what this might do for his legend and his place in the oceanic MMA world and economy cannot be understated. It'd be very, very big and important. But, if I'm the UFC, again, I don't really know what they want, but my guess would be it's like, well, we got a guy who can unlock a part of Europe we've really not been able to unlock. He could be a big, big star for us there as well as here. He's not even close to 30 years of age. Like, just where do you think the priority would be? I suspect it's with him. But the question is if he's ready for all of that. We don't know. One thing you didn't bring up, and I know we got to move along, but one thing I want to bring up is BC, dude, Topuria has been talking greasy. I mean, my man's been talking.
I'm a 45-year-old dad. Can you translate greasy?
Okay. Let me make sure I don't lose the hold on. The thing is, I've lost the autofocus. There we go.
I mean, I have teenage sons. I'm trying to pick up on the young speak a little bit here.
We're not cool. We're not cool, but I just mean the following. You have seen this, right? For example, he was like, yeah, when I beat Volk, I'm not going to give Max Holloway or Brian Ortega or any of these guys a title fight. I'm just going to go right to Conor McGregor. That's not so much greasy, but it's like, it's a bold thing to say. How about changing already, like weeks ago, changing his Instagram profile to say UFC champion, and then him posing with the belt as his Instagram like profile photo. Just a level of like dismissiveness about one of the best fighters we've ever. I mean, here's what I would say. It's like, dude, I like his chances, but even I don't think that's a good idea. Even I am like, bro, tone it down a little. So one thing I want to point out here that's worth thinking about is, dude, if you have gone out there and you have changed your Instagram profile and you have said, Volkanovski, you're going to like thrash him everywhere, and that your contemporaries don't even deserve a title shot, and the only thing that's next for you is Conor McGregor, and then you lose. And then let's say you lose badly. Like, let's say you get stopped, right? Something like that. Like, it's a fucking Miyagi versus, Danielson teacher's moment here where Miyagi lets him know what time it is. People are like, oh, he'd be embarrassed. That's the least of my concerns for him in a situation like that. What I'd be more curious about is, dude, you have told yourself that you are somebody, that when the time comes to show it, you were not that guy. What does that do to you? What does that do to your psyche if you have lied to yourself about who you are, and then reality comes thunderously crashing down on you? Well, I wonder what that means.
The O'Malley loss to Cheeto almost being a little bit of the same thing, but I think O'Malley was able to lean on the injury side of the excuse, and certainly they've got the rematch coming up, and he gets to prove that. You make an interesting point.
And that wasn't a title fight. That wasn't a title fight. This is a title fight.
He's so all in right now, and everything you're saying, that yes, a loss could be destructively humbling. But I do want to ask you one thing on the thing you teased there about what he's been boasting. Let's be really honest here. Let's say he knocked out Volkanovski in the first 2 rounds, didn't get hurt, and did it in such destructive fashion that every single person watching around the globe is like, a star was just born. He just knocked out one of the best to ever do it. And let's say he grabs that microphone in Anaheim and says, Conor McGregor, get your shit together. I'll see you in the main event, April 13th at UFC 300. Would the UFC pull that? I mean, obviously it'd have to be a non-title fight. Conor's not making 145 any side of this side of Roadhouse anywhere, Luke. He was taking all of Pacers meds before that fight, before that movie, by the way. Would anyone do a non-title catchweight fight to say, oh, you just knocked out Volkanovski, will become the biggest thing that ever happened? Here's injured old ass Conor. No, they're not doing that, right? They're not. Come on. They're not.
I'll say this. If he knocks out Volkanovski and then goes out there and calls for Conor, and they're not going to do it, but to your point, if they made it, let's say he stopped Conor, do you understand how big of a star Topuria would be? You understand that? Wow. And a guy who can do media in Latin America as well, right? I mean, not just in Europe, but in Latin America. I mean, the guy, and obviously in Europe as well, because he speaks Georgian too. Like, he could be poised for big things, but let's slow down. He's got his hands full on Saturday. Let's see what happens with that first.
Love it. Can't wait. Cannot freaking wait for this fight. But it doesn't stop there. This is an absolute. I've been telling anybody that will listen, because people think I hate Luke. People think I hate like the UFC. I hate Dana. They think I hate like, skinhead fighter. Like, they think a lot of weird things. I freaking love this pay-per-view main card. Let's get into the co-main event. Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, middleweight. They both could use a big win. Costa really trying to put just an up and down line. Really, you got to be honest, since the loss to Adesanya, it's been wild. Didn't get the Chimaev fight like we wanted to see where he was at. He's been in and out of fight announcements, injuries, setbacks. Yes, he beat Rockhold in an absolutely wild-ass fight. But Robert Whittaker's got a lot more questions to answer about the one-sided demolition loss to Dricus du Plessis, which I think for the first time made us go, oh, wait, this living legend Robert Whittaker might not end up with a second run with this belt. This might be the best of what we've seen from him so far. How do you look at those competing narratives and try to handicap what to expect in Saturday's co-main?
Man, these two are so strange. Well, in different ways. I mean, Paulo Costa is strange because he's a strange guy, but Whittaker is strange because we're so surprised at how he arrived at this position. And we just, I never, not that I'm upset about the fight. I think the fight is great, but I never saw him getting defeated by DDP. And so, to me, man, if I could be honest with you, I think both of these guys have a lot to prove. Let's start with Paulo Costa here for just a second, the eraser, right? I mean, his competition schedule has not gone well. He didn't fight at all in 2023. His last fight was a fight in August of 2022 against Luke Rockhold. This will be the first one since. He was, had reasonably scheduled fights against Aliskerov and Chimaev, and nothing happened. And then before that, he fought once in 2021, and then once in 2022. So he had in 2020. In 2020, he lost to Izzy. He comes back in 2021. He loses to Marvin Vettori. He comes back in 2022 and has a terrible fight against Luke Rockhold. You're like, where is he? And he won the fight against Luke Rockhold, but Luke Rockhold looked like a very aging version of himself, BC. He did not look like the guy who won the Strikeforce or UFC middleweight title, not by a long shot. And Costa couldn't finish him off. And here we have him against Whittaker, and it's like, is he progressing with the development of his game in the way that you would hope, especially following the loss to Izzy? I would say that the evidence shows us that maybe it's somewhat inconclusive. Like, there's still some room to show, and this could be a great opportunity. But to this point, has he really rounded a corner since then? I've not seen that. Now, you go in there and you beat Robert Whittaker, when you do it with some tactical poise, we can revisit this conversation. But up to this point, since the fight against Izzy, I don't know, man. It's just been not that great. On the Whittaker side, what more?
On a little bit on the Rockhold fight, only to say that Luke Rockhold showed in like an unnatural level of resistance and spite, and that's why that fight was so weird. Sure. I don't know if I look at that as a huge negative for Costa. Like, I would have loved for him to have finished an old guy in that spot who you're fighting because he's a former champion and a big name and giving you a chance to bounce back. But those circumstances were kind of weird. I will agree with everything before that. What I saw from Costa in the fights from the Adesanya fight through that Rockhold was just a guy that's not like in charge of a game plan or technique. He's just gone out there to fight. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yes. I mean, and here's the kind of interesting part about it. Like, Whittaker, we know, like, before he fought Dricus, remember, he fought Marvin Vettori and looked very good doing it for the most part, right? So you thought going into that Dricus fight, like, okay, he's going to do something here, and he got beat. But this is what I go back to. Now, Dricus and Costa have very different games, and we should say that. But if there is one thing that unites them, is that there is a little bit of physical recklessness with them. Would you not agree with that, BC?
Yes.
These are two guys that are physically powerful in very dangerous ways, and that might leave certain openings at times that a guy like Whittaker can 1,000,000,000% take advantage of, but it carries some additional risk. I would say, though, that having seen DDP now fight his way to the championship, he has shown more technical know-how, more strategic resolve than what I get from Costa, which is a little bit more, I'm a good athlete, I punch hard, let's just see where this goes. You just don't get the kind of the same thing. So I feel like you do get an interesting test of Whittaker coming off of a knockout loss to a very physical guy. Here he's got another physical guy, but you dial down some of the strategy that he normally would have to encounter relative to DDP. It seems very winnable for Robert Whittaker, ... unless he's fallen off a cliff. And I don't think he has. He's just 33 years old. I think he's poised for a rebound here, but he's got to play it smart.
I think he had to have underestimated DDP. I mean, I was out there telling people there's literally not a path to victory. There's literally not a chance, because I just didn't think that DDP was as good as he showed in that fight, and he turned me into a believer. The odds makers, though, FanDuel in Las Vegas, giving Whittaker the respect at -220 as the favorite, +168 for Costa. I really felt in that specific loss to Vettori that we saw Costa, like you said, it's just like, I'm going to just shoot my athleticism at you. I'm not really going to move my head in return. I'm not really going to, it's just a guy who's winging it with the secret juice. And I'm sure, if you could live in one fighter's DMs for a day, Luke, would Costa be in the top 3? I think he'd have to be, right?
Oh, yeah. So, let's think about that. Top 3. Let's do the Mount Rushmore of whose DMs you want to have for a day.
Okay, Brian Ortega. Don't
Brian Ortega.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
He's
Brian
the
Ortega.
of our era. Okay.
Fair enough. Ortega. Costa would be another one. Probably Conor. Connor's a rich and celebrity.
You have to respect the brand, right? You've got to put him in there. You have to.
Yeah, he's probably got all kinds of people hitting him up. And then maybe your last one would be, Ooh, that's a good one. That's a tough one.
It could be Ilia after Saturday because he's got he's got that toughness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be him. I mean, you get the idea. Yeah, I respect it.
I mean, too bad Roman Dolidze bit the bullet last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever that was.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably got good. I don't know. It's like, how far do I want to get into this joke? For me, I could do a whole podcast on it, but I don't think that's what people want. Okay, really be honest with you. All right. So, is there something you need to see from Whittaker to show you he's back? I mean, if anything, I teased off the top that maybe the DDP loss was the first time we're like, oh, like maybe age is caught up with him, but I think he overlooked him, and I do think the size difference ultimately was a factor. Was it not? Like, Whittaker looked like a small middleweight in that fight.
Yeah, it's going to be a factor here as well. This is what I mean. Like, there is a similarity. He's got two physical bruising hulks that he has to get through, and that's not going to be easy. But the thing is this: it's like this is the reality of Paulo Costa, right? So strikes landed per minute 6.5. I mean, that's not only high. He hits hard, so that's a lot to deal with. But here's the downside for him. Strikes absorbed per minute, 6.38. I mean, people steal on this dude a lot. He is hittable. He is very, very hittable. And you would imagine a sniper and a guy with great timing, and he's not physically past it, I don't think. That should be winnable for him. So, big questions. And by the way, it's not like if Costa loses to Whittaker, you're like, oh, he's trash. But I would say a couple things. If he loses and it's a clean one, you're like, well, okay, so this guy's not going to be elite, right? I mean, we can just sort of declare that. And then on the other side, if he gets knocked out himself, it's like you really don't even know, if he gets finished off, like what would that mean for him at all? Like, I think there's potentially major stock damage that he could suffer. An interesting moment. And by the way, if Whittaker wins, it's not like you're like, oh, well, now he's ready for the championship again. But I do think it'd be rejuvenating for him in a really important way.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to see if he can do it. I think his left hook's going to be a big weapon against Costa. It's going to be a lot of boxing, a lot of hit and not get hit, in and out.
It's going to be a matador game.
Yeah, it's just really up to, can Costa make it a wild enough fight that he can take Robert off of his game plan, make him react a little bit, and try to slip something big in there. Or, we'll see. We'll see. Costa, you still got to give him a benefit of the doubt. Maybe because he gave us one of the greatest gifts of all time, Luke, and that was that first round against Vitor Belfort. Not Vitor, against Yoel Romero. He can go in there and absolutely cause freaking havoc, especially if you're willing to exchange and trade with him. It'll be interesting to see if he can get Whittaker off script. I don't think he will. Let's go to the next one. No one's talking about this. A rescheduling Geoff Neal at welterweight against Ian Machado-Garry, who had been through the ringer just a few months ago in terms of public reputation with he's filming sparring sessions at gyms he's visiting that he shouldn't. Everyone's calling him a cuck. Colby and Sean Strickland won't stop talking about his wife. It got weird. It got ugly. But now he's back, Luke. He still is potentially one of the guys who has next in this entire sport. Is that an incorrect statement to make at this point?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. We can't say it's not. But I think I need to see a little bit more before I declare that it is. To me, he's kind of teetering here on not even teetering. We just don't have quite enough information. So his best win to date would be the one against Neil Magny. But as good as that was, that's not enough to tell me like what the high watermark of what he can achieve is. And more to the point, that's not good enough to tell me how he will do against some of the better guys in this division. Now, Geoff Neal is very different from Neil Magny in a lot of respects, so it's a very tough challenge. I actually like this fight a lot for both guys. You would imagine, BC, a guy like Geoff Neal is going to want to use his hands to get in close, and he's got dynamite power. And then a guy like Neal-Garry seems to be a little bit more wants to play the distance game, and you saw that against Neil Magny as well. I think you're probably going to get a lot of that. The thing that's kind of interesting for me is like for all of the turmoil that Gary had to go through, most of it juvenile and prurient nonsense, but nevertheless, there was a lot of it. I actually feel like this is only going to boost his profile over time. And I know that some of that boosting is going to come at the expense of, he's going to be made fun of along the way. But I actually think in the end, it's going to serve his box office interest. It's going to serve his visibility interest. And I'll also say if he goes in there and has a dominant win over Geoff Neal, a good competitor, This will, I think it would really set him up for a potentially to answer some of these bigger questions that you're asking. But we should also say that if he goes in there and like gets viciously KO'd, the onslaught that he got once before, I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as that, but it's going to be pretty bad. He's going to get, it could do serious damage to his reputation. So this is one of those fights that's really interesting to me. It's really going to be a very tactical battle. And I think that a guy like Ian-Garry has a lot of opportunity to stick it to people should he decide to do that with a win, but not so easy to get. A tough competitor he's got here in Geoff Neal.
I don't know if he'll get there, Ian-Garry, but I'll tell you what, I do seem to be impressed, even with like he brings too much attention on himself, and now he's a product of memes.
He's overexposed, yeah.
He's overexposed, yes. He's jumping into the deep end of this generation. Cameras following you all the time on purpose, documenting your life, being a character. I felt he's been too much of a purposeful McGregor clone to try to show like I'm the next big Irish thing coming. But I also think he does seem to have that unnatural ability to block out all of that. Like he welcomes all that noise, but then he seems to have the ability, at least up to this point, to block that out and still bring out the best in him. I could see a scenario in which he gets like a head kick stoppage or something crazy here because he does seem to have those abilities. But if you do make a mistake or F around with a guy like Geoff Neal, like Geoff Neal's coming off a loss, but I do think in this portion of his career, he's largely reborn. And in that loss, are you giving him credit for making Shavkat work more than anyone else has?
Yeah. He tuned Shavkat up at times. He was blasting him as he got into range. And Shavkat only got that at the last kind of minute. With this like sort of weird choke to the side of him with their back along the fence. It was a very, very unusual. Like not a lot of guys are even going to know how to do that, much less finish it. Yeah, dude, he performed ably. And again, dude, Shavkat, you're asking about a guy who's got like star potential and championship potential. I mean, it's written all over Shavkat Rakhmonov. Ian-Garry to me looks like I see a flickering of some of those lights, but I haven't seen enough of a performance beyond what we saw against Magny, which I think was, I'm not going to say easy. That's not the right thing, BC. But I think a guy like Magny a guy like Garry doesn't like to mix it up in the way that Topuria does within that mid-range, that boxing range. He really doesn't like to play there at all. He likes to use his length, which is smart. And we've talked about this before. Fighting Magny fit naturally into that skill set, right? It made it very, very easy to do, relatively speaking, because Magny just kind of stood in the same place the whole time to be kicked. I don't know if Geoff Neal's going to do that. And Geoff Neal's return fire, and you would agree with this, right? Geoff Neal's ability to return fire is very different than what Magny has to offer.
Different threat altogether. The odds I think are fair in this case. FanDuel having minus 245 for Garry, Geoff Neal plus 186, but a lot of live dog potential right there. I mean, you would, as much as it would be a shock and an upset, if Geoff Neal wins this by knockout, you're not going to sit here and say you're surprised Sunday morning, right? It's possible. No. It's in play.
And by the way, sure. He trains with Saif Saud out of Fortis MMA. He got a great coach, a great team, powerful athlete. I think that Garry, the thing that saves Garry a lot is I don't know exactly what physical tools he has yet, BC. I mean, I've seen some of them obviously, but I don't think we've gotten the full array of it. And so that's where some of the questions come from. And so if you can do this, and you can diffuse a guy like Geoff Neal and really work around that power and then land on him, not just like touch him and go, but land on him, I think that would say a lot. But let's see what Garry gives us before we sort of make some of these declarations, All
right. I was thinking quickly, Luke, maybe when Average Joe Art works with Brian Ortega, they can do like a ladies man type skit vibe. Remember that great segment on SNL with Tim Meadows? Remember they made a movie about it? Maybe like Ortega could be the
Tim Meadows, one of the most slept on dudes from 90s SNL. True or false?
He was. He hung on too long, to be fair, with the show, but he was one of those glue guys, one of those absolute glue guys who could raise his game to another level by playing a bit part in an important scene with some killers of multi-generations in SNL lore. I do have that massive book, that oral history that James Miller wrote, the same guy who wrote
These Guys Have All the Fun, something like that?
Yeah, I read the ESPN one, and it was incredible. I've been chipping away at the SNL one over time, and it's also absolutely incredible if you're an old school fan of that. Luke, this next card is the fourth card on the fight on the main card in the sport's deepest and best division. And I'm here to tell you, this is not only the second best fight on this card overall, I love this fight so much, Henry Cejudo versus Merab Dvalishvili, that even without a title, if they had to do a, hey guys, we can't figure out UFC 300, so we're just going to take this fight off of Saturday and make it just like a de facto co-main for 300 or main event, I'd even sign up for it. Luke, tell me why I shouldn't sit here and tell you that Cejudo Merab is insanely awesome of a fight, which is going to produce likely the next title challenger. And if Cejudo at this age can come off of that close loss to the champion and beat a guy who looks like future champion in waiting, we're going to have a lot to talk about. We already do about Cejudo switching coaches, which we'll get to in a second. But are you anywhere near as fired up as I am? Because I need this fight. I want this fight. Give me this fight right here, Luke. Right freaking here, okay? Right here.
Dude,
that's where I want
this fight bangs. This fight bangs. This is an amazing fight. And listen, don't take our word for it. You had, I don't know if it was this week or the last, BC. I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that, where Cejudo himself said, hey, if I lose to Merab, I don't know if continuing in the fight game is worth it anymore. He's 37 years of age, right? He's now 37. Think about that. Henry Cejudo is 37 years of age. He's 37 years of age. If he loses very controversially to, or very closely at a bare minimum, to Aljamain Sterling, but he can get back with a win over Merab, hey, he's cooking with gas. He probably gets the next title shot. I guess we'll see. I don't know, but it's not out of the realm of possibility at all. But if you lose, by Henry's own admission, that could be the end. So this is high stakes no matter what. This could be a retirement fight for a guy who was an Olympic champion and then a two-weight world champion in the UFC. That's big by itself. But more to the point, BC, about the matchup individually, it's just a phenomenal one. Merab Dvalishvili has what we have considered on this show to be one of the very best motors in combat sports we've really ever seen. A guy who has no limit. He's a no-limit soldier, Master P style, in terms of the fact that he has to never, ever ration offense. He never has to worry about whether the gas is going to be there in the fifth round for him to make a push. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be there at a level that will shock you. He's going up against a guy who is a little bit longer in the tooth at age 37, but is something of a technical marvel himself in Henry Cejudo, a guy who's got lights-out wrestling, who, in my view, BC, has the best inside trip in all of MMA, and he uses it. He used it on Demetrius Johnson. He used it on a lot of different folks. He is very, very gifted with it, who is a phenomenal striker when he's, I think, playing at his best, so to speak, and has, just a wealth of combat sports and, of course, MMA experience as well. He, to me, is the technician here. Whereas Merab, I do think, is getting technically better. And that is also part of the story. And by the way, BC, 3-round fight. Let's keep that in mind. It's a 3-round fight, which could change the equation here a little bit, right? But Merab is going to put on a tidal wave of offense on this guy. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, does Henry Cejudo have enough technical knowledge and the ability to match some of that physical intensity to overpower what will be a much more physical effort in terms of volume and everything else from a guy like Merab? It is a fascinating question with high stakes involved. Winner probably gets a title shot. Loser, in the case of Cejudo, if it's him, might retire from the sport. Big fight.
I don't think people respect Henry Cejudo enough. And it's not a new thought. We've always said that, look, some of the way that he's embraced the cringe character, the Triple C, that whole line of humor, and he was more aggressive years ago online with this. I felt like it did water down his accomplishments in what people really thought of him. But let me just remind you of one thing. I know he just is coming off a loss. He took a 3-year retirement, came back with no warm-up fight, took on a pound-for-pound ranked Aljamain Sterling, who was the champion in the sport's historically deep bantamweight division at the moment. And even though he rightfully lost, he did show you that short of a late start and some ring rust, which did seem to show up in the first couple rounds, he was in that fight. It was almost head to head down the stretch. It really shows you that had he not taken off so much time, or had he been able to put back-to-back training camps together, which is why I do hold a lot of optimism that even at 37, even against Merab, who, like I said, if anybody in this sport screams future champion more than Merab, it's like, get in line right behind him. Like, he's right there. I think Cejudo actually could do this, and I think he deserves more respect than I necessarily think people are saying, because what he did against Aljo on such a break against such a dynamic fighter and was able to rally in that fight and raise his game and, you know, be respectable in a split decision loss, be very respectable. There is that technical advantage like you're talking about. But Luke, Merab in that endless motor inevitably takes down and wears down ultimately everybody. Will Cejudo's gold medal winning wrestling defense and grappling ability be enough to make this a stand-up fight? Because if this is a stand-up fight for 15 minutes, even 37, Cejudo's got skills. You got to give him the credit for the beautiful mind he has become, the IQ that has allowed him to be great. And while he hasn't maximized the second half of his career through some strategic time off, he's right back in the mix. Can he avoid being on his back against Merab? This is a yes or no question.
Yes. Yes, he can. Yes. Merab is a little bit like Yoel Romero. What I mean by that is Yoel had, I don't know if his numbers were the same, but the point would be this. Yoel had the ability to like deliver you to the mat, but he did not have great mat control. He came from freestyle wrestling where it's not the same. It's the folk style where you actually get much better of the mat control. You would never see him like collect wrists and then go for ground and pound. He would be just kind of wilding on the floor. He never really had the same control. Merab's a bit like that. Now, Merab has many more takedowns and much more offense, but he's not like a ground guy in that particular way. However, BC, I've got to read you these stats. I mean, it's just the most shocking shit on earth. Now, this won't be shocking. Henry Cejudo's takedown defense, 83%. Very good, obviously. People can get him down, but he's hard to hold down, right? We know that. Takedown accuracy is not high, but he's good for about 2 per 15 minutes. So you might get 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. This is going to be a 15-minute fight. How about old Merab? Merab's takedown defense, not quite as good, but still pretty good, 78%. But again, who holds him down for long periods of time? Not many people. Takedowns per 15 minutes, BC. Per 15 minutes. 6.55. I don't think I've ever seen one that high. That's absurd. That's more than 2 a round. That's insane. That's insane that he can do this kind of thing. And he can do it, by the way, from minute 1 to minute 15 to minute 25. To me, what's going to be interesting on this one, BC, is I could imagine a world, because, by the way, Jose Aldo was able to stop most of the takedowns, if not nearly all of them, from Merab, but he couldn't get Merab off of him, and he ultimately succumbed in the end. Now, granted, that was elevation. That's a little bit different, but you get the idea. But the point I wanted to make here was, BC, what if Cejudo comes out and has a strong round 1, stuffs the takedowns, down blocks, circles, hits him with some big shots, and you're like, okay, you're down 1, Merab. Merab is not a great finisher, right? That there is one knock on him. He's not that great at putting guys away. I mean, obviously he has some finishes on his record, but he doesn't have lights out jiu-jitsu. He doesn't have one-punch knockout power. It's really not what he does. He rains on you. That's what he does. If he loses the first, that second round battle is going to be the most crucial test of the entire fight itself. Now, if Merab's out to a lead, obviously he can't, just let it go. But to me, it gets much more interesting if he's down a round, you got 2 left, and you have to rain on this guy. Wow, that's good. Dude, you were so right. This is the second best fight on this card by a million miles. This one is so interesting.
Let's talk about the odds quickly. FanDuel having -196 Merab Dvalishvili as your favorite, +152 for the 37-year-old.
That's about right.
Cejudo. But if you watched the UFC countdown show ahead of this card, a awkward reality TV type setup moment where Henry Cejudo sat down the captain, a friend of this program, Eric Albarracin, somebody who has been in his corner since the Olympics, who has essentially been his mascot. But Luke, let's put some respect on the captain's name. He's there with the Pitbull brothers in Brazil constantly. He's a world-class trainer. That was awkward as shit to see Henry sit him down. It didn't feel like this was the first time they had this conversation. They looked like they had it for cameras, and just say, Captain, man, I know you support me, but I got to go in a different direction. I got to get a new team. Captain had that sort of like gulp moment, but it looked like he was trying to be a friend and not get upset. And then Henry's like, see, that's why you're the greatest coach. Dude, you just embarrassed the F out of a man who has been part of the fabric of your story. I'm not saying that fighters can't change trainers. Like, it happens in key moments all the time, and look at how much growth sometimes they can get out of it. Who's going to be the new trainer? And Luke, why do you do this on camera? What the hell's going on here, Cejudo? That was cringe.
I mean, to the point, it's like, I don't have any comment on whether Eric Albarracin should have been fired. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I leave that decision, we all do, to Henry. It's none of our business. It's his camp. It's his money. It's his relationship. It's his to manage the way he sees fit in terms of promoting his best long-term professional interests. I don't understand why he did that. I don't quite get that. It's like, okay, so there's two possible interpretations, right? So one is that he did it on camera because he's just kind of a clueless donk, which would not be a great interpretation, but it would make sense. The other one is he knew it's probably not the best to do in terms of like maximizing professionalism, but he wanted it for the clicks. And it's like, that's also not great, where you're transactionalizing the relationship you have with a long-standing like friend and like professional colleague. I mean, BC, I'll be clear. When I'm ready to dump you, I am also going to do it on camera. But, I'm going to do it with a little bit more tact, and I'll bring a cake to the party.
Yeah.
I'm just being serious.
The barbershop window, Luke. It'll be
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I found this one like baffling. I found it very, and the people being like, no, because afterwards he was like, you're one of the greatest coaches. I'm like, guys, if you care about someone and you have to have a tough conversation with them, it's not our business. It's like, I don't, to the point where I don't even want to see it. Yeah, strange. And by the way, I think he followed me up until recently, and then I tweeted very lightly, like, ? Could have been done behind closed doors, and I think he unfollowed me for it. So there you go.
Oh, look, you can't live your life trying to befriend fighters unless you plan on doing a completely critique-free coverage style, which, by the way, would get you front row credentials at a UFC fight and possibly an on-air job with Power Slap. So if you had played your cards better, your career could be in a different spot. But I wouldn't stress that. Do you know which coach or team Cejudo is plugging in?
I don't. I reached out to Eric via WhatsApp. I haven't heard back yet, so let's see what happens. I don't know.
I hope he sends you back a drunken video where he's wearing those skull glasses like he sent us during what was it? It was Logan Paul versus Floyd in Miami.
Floyd, yeah, at the Hard Rock Cafe or Hard Rock
we both
Stadium.
Saw him on the floor of the stadium, but then we had to go to the upper deck to get ready to film our thing. And he sent us the drunkest love messages of all time. And, I still feel it right here, pitter patter in the heart. That man gets us, Luke. Okay.
I think he's a great guy. Again, Henry might be right to let him go. I don't know what is going on where he feels like that might be the right call. Only Henry knows the answer to that. I'm just like, dude, like, you don't have to do that either performatively or otherwise for any of us. Like, we're cool on that. No thanks.
I can't wait to see if Cejudo can pull this off. And if he doesn't, if Merab gets the win under any means necessary, fit him for the winner of Cheeto versus O'Malley, Luke. It's time. Yep. Fit his belt for the size, for the title. Right? I mean, it's time. Let's close out the main card. It's time right now. Middleweights, Anthony Hernandez kicking it off against Roman Kopylov. Luke, it feels like a step down. Tell me why it isn't.
Candidly, I love this fight. Now, this was supposed to be Anthony Hernandez, I believe, versus Ikram Aliskerov, and then he fell out, and so they got Kopylov coming in on short notice. So maybe that part's not so great. I don't know his readiness at this point. But if you're talking about two guys who are one of the more exciting prospects / contenders at 185, it's these two guys for sure. I mean, Anthony Hernandez, guys, he's got wins over Rodolfo Vieira. He's got wins over Marc-Andre Barriault, who just fought recently. He's got a win over Edmund Shabazian. He's got 4 wins in a row, by the way. He's got a tremendous arm triangle. How about this, BC? We were talking about takedowns per 15 minutes. How about a guy, I just said Merab had an insane number. How about Anthony Hernandez, 6.79? 6.79, more than 2 a round, and he's a middleweight. He has a phenomenal gas tank himself. By the way, he's got a positive striking differential, 4.33 to 3.36. If you're looking at that for Anthony Hernandez. Now, I don't think he's the striker that Kopylov is by a million miles, but he's got a lot going for him in the right direction. Kopylov is interesting because he has quietly come out of nowhere. I mean, his first fight, I think, in the UFC against Duraev, or the first fight I remember from him, was not an impressive showcase. But since then, he beat your guy, Dick Rico. And then he has the winner of Punahele Soriano, and then Ribeiro, and then Fremd in his last 2 contests. And he has absolutely blown the doors off these guys. Violent striker, hands and feet, quickly, good combinations, can work at range, no hesitation throwing, push forward, all kinds of stuff. His numbers don't look as impressive statistically, 4.72 strikes landed per minute to 4.11, although he does have a positive differential. And to that point, BC, 0.47 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's not going to go for the takedown, but you might be asking, well, what's his takedown defensive rate? How about 92%? Very, very good up to this point. So to me, BC, this is not quite the same as Cejudo versus Merab, where the way we had set it up, but it's got some of the same features where you've got this is a little bit more striker grappler, although Hernandez can strike, but Hernandez has got this guy who's going to be putting all of this sort of multi-phasic offense together, right? Trying to dump it on a guy like Kopylov, force him to wrestle. I would just say this. I'd be very surprised if Hernandez tries to strike with Kopylov for long periods, unless he's forced to. And if he's forced to, it's a different ballgame. But on the other hand, if Hernandez is able to get the takedown, dude, Fluffy Hernandez is one of these guys who has come out of nowhere, an exciting fighter at 185 pounds. Love it.
He's the favorite, Fluffy Hernandez, minus 205 on FanDuel, plus 158 the other way to Kopylov, who is on that streak, as you mentioned. That's your kickoff banger to open the pay-per-view card. But Luke, the preliminary featured bout on ESPN and ESPN Plus has an interesting storyline at women's strawweight, the 115, that Mackenzie Dern on short notice will come in and take Amanda Lemos, looking for yet again a redemptive win to put the long-standing title hopes on track. Last time out for Mackenzie Dern, it was absolutely disastrous against Jessica Andrade. And Andrade, who had coming off of multiple losses, stoppage finish losses. And here we saw Andrade hammer away with shots. Dern eventually fold and get stopped in the second round. That fight was notable because Jason Perillo, after Ruka closed, was not in her corner. Who was Antonio Tricoli, who now in this past week, the two of them have shared an Instagram post portraying that they are in a relationship with each other, which had been the whisper around that fight against Andrade. So new coach, I'm sure her dad Megatron's still in the corner as well. But Luke, it's the same narrative. Can she get it together? Taking a short notice fight against a dangerous fighter gives her the opportunity to quickly change that narrative. But is there enough time with a new team, a new coach, and a new situation here for Dern to ever get right? That's the age-old, timeless MMA question. Is it ever going to happen or not? Does she have 9 lives before eventually getting a title shot? Will it happen here Saturday night? Yes or no, Luke?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, right?
Dern has looked, in that last fight against Andrade, she looked terrible. And I try not to use words like that when I talk about professional fighters. I really try. I'm sure they don't feel this way, but just peel back the curtain for just a minute, BC. We do try to not be insulting to fighters if we can at all help it. Now, sometimes we get that wrong and sometimes we do, but I try not to do it. And even now, I'm not doing it maliciously, BC. I'm not doing it. I'm going to stick it to Mackenzie Dern and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I'm just trying to be like an honest evaluator. I had made a video, BC. This was some time ago. If I'm looking at her run, Mackenzie Dern, I think this was, I'm not trying to see when this was. I forget which fight it was, where she had like this really terrible ground and pound because she was balancing off of her head to keep a high hip position so that she could go for like an armbar or something, which never really came. And so she had this really sort of very, very, very limited ground and pound versus kind of really driving someone and pinning them to the floor and then beating them up more Dagestani style, which is a much better style of ground and pound and like how it needed to change. And there was she looked good against Angela Hill, I thought, for the most part, but then really bad, really, really bad. She's regressed in many, many ways. I think changing coaches and changing teams, again, there can be a way to do it and a way not to do it. I'm beginning to question about whether or not she'd done it the right way. I just have not seen basic development. How have you been in the UFC this long and your double is still, you're bending over at the waist like this with terrible posture? You're not going to run. I mean, there's certain ways to get away with that, but even though she doesn't really necessarily do all that well, her striking, like where's the jab? She does take a punch well. I think that has saved her. And Amanda Lemos, she got a big right hand.
She does have a big right hand, yeah.
And Amanda Lemos, remember, she got head and arm triangles standing. Now, granted, Jessica Andrade is a powerhouse, so that kind of explains it. But still, she's submission vulnerable where against anybody, if she gets him to the floor, you like Dern's chances, all things being what they are. But BC, I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you saw something in the Andrade fight that didn't make alarm bells go off, that didn't tell you that she was heading in the wrong direction. It was bad for me.
Protected her chances of putting the train back on the tracks this whole stretch, and it's not out of any weird Instagram love that you might ascribe for me in a joking motion. It's just that there are some intangibles in there that she is overwhelming, or not overwhelming, but she's plus at, and the chin's one of them. But, you know, anytime she puts together a good stretch of striking, you either have to question the opponent she's fighting in terms of not getting too overboard in excitement, or you have to keep in the reality that her performances wane at times from fight to fight. How about this, Luke? She'll be fighting a 36-year-old Amanda Lemos, who's still tough out, very dangerous. But her last 3 wins, meaning Mackenzie Dern, while on paper they look great when you beat Angela Hill, Marina Rodriguez by stoppage, and Michelle Watterson, all 3 of those fighters were 35 or older at the point of Dern fighting them as well. So you can see the sort of level of competition and the time she faces them, that yes, there are certain matchups here where she can just, almost like Paulo Costa in a different way, can rely on the size, the power, the chin, the explosiveness, some of these other things, but all the stuff you've been picking apart meticulously, technique-wise, that if it doesn't get switched or changed or improved upon, will ultimately be her undoing. We literally saw that happen against Andrade. And then you add in the change of direction with the corner and the leadership behind her. I mean, I'll give Tricoli a second chance here in the second fight as head trainer, but it just seems like, you know, with everything that she's vocalized ahead of her last 2 fights about the difficulties of her divorce and the custody battle and the everything negative that goes on with that, we thought that maybe revived her 2 fights ago, but when she stepped in there against a tougher matchup, the lack of head movement, everything just went against her. I'm now at the point where she can't be my next Adrian Broner or Zab Judah or any other fighter you insert, where I'm just always going to believe they've got one more big one or an ability to start another win streak. I no longer believe it, Luke. I've seen enough to know I've seen too much. I hope for her sake she can get a W here and turn it around. But the implosion factor, which maybe was held together in the past by the fact that she has a good chin, and you don't find Jessica Andrade's often in the women's strawweight division. People with one-punch power that can change the course of the fight. But it really only took a small handful of overhands from Andrade to look like the nose was on its way to being broken and that she could be stopped at any point. And that was only round 2, by the way. So right. The more sophisticated the striker, the worse of an issue she's going to have, especially if she can't take you down and try to dominate physically on top. So she's entering reality show TV levels. I've said that about certain fighters' careers, like Aaron Pico or like Teofimo Lopez in boxing right now. You just don't know what you're going to get, man. But the journey and the ride is still entertaining for that idea of seeing, can they finally put it together? Man, this is a close-up, dude. This is a big pay-per-view, free TV, more or less, on ESPN and the featured bout. It's been now or never before, but is it really now or never now? Is this a now or never fight?
Well, I mean, she's 30. She'll be 31. I mean, I think she'll be 31 soon. I'm not sure exactly how. I think she's like 30 in 10 months, so she's not. It's like, is time up? No, in the sense that she's still in her physical prime, or should be overall in her career prime. But what I'm saying is, pardon me, if this is how you're looking in your prime, yeah, you're not going to be champion, right? I mean, again, let's reserve the right to say, hey, let's see what happens next. And, if she gets it turned around, all things great. But up to this point, have I seen something that tells me she can be a champion? No, I have not. I've not seen that.
Lemos minus 150, your FanDuel betting favorite. Plus 118, the slight dog, is Dern. Look, quickly, Marcos Rogerio, De Lima is going to take one half of the tour of Tafa against Justin. I don't think you're into that. Is there anything else on this prelim or early prelim that you do think the fans should wake up for or schedule for and take notice?
Yeah, Rinya Nakamura taking on Carlos Vera out of Ecuador. But that's not the guy I want you to pay attention to. It's Rinya Nakamura. Nakamura is undefeated, but that's not the most interesting part about him. How old is he? Nakamura is currently just 28 years old. Nakamura was an under 23 freestyle world champion in wrestling. This was a guy who, and you're probably asking, how are the Japanese good at wrestling? The Japanese are very good at wrestling, and he was very, very good up to a point. He tried to make the Olympics in the 2020 cycle. He failed to qualify for the team, and then just automatically turned his attention to MMA. Or maybe he made the team and he didn't advance, but it was the 2020 Olympic cycle that he ultimately decided that he wasn't going to pursue it any further. The point I'm trying to make here is he had achievements at the junior level, on the cadet level, which is sort of like the collegiate level, where he had done really, really, really well. So he is somebody who is a force, a good athlete, undefeated, background in freestyle wrestling, converted early enough to really be something special. To this point, BC, he is currently sitting at, I think, 8-0 heading into this Carlos Vera fight. And I think I met this dude, I think, Carlos, when I went to go interview Corey Sandhagen for MK at the 50-50. He was there. Very, very nice guy. Very nice guy. But he is up against it with a dynamite athlete and a top prospect. Dude, all of a sudden, Japan's starting to turn out some guys worth paying attention to. It's been a while, but I'm glad to see it. Let's go. More of that.
Yeah, I am always glad to see that for sure. Look, I also want to keep note of the curtain jerker of the evening at women's flyweight when 35-year-old Andrea KGB Lee puts her 3-fight losing skid on the line against a Miranda Maverick who bounced back in a nice way from that more or less one-sided loss to Jasmine Jasdavicius when she came back a month later in July and took it to Priscilla Cachoeira. That's 3 wins in her last 4 fights. Should 125 be prepared to fear the Maverick anytime soon, or what?
I mean, here's the thing. She's just 26 years old. I feel like we put, certainly I was among them, put too many expectations on her given her relative youth. So I'd like to see how this one goes. This is a winnable one, but it's also like, I don't know if you said the odds on this one, BC, for Miranda Maverick. And
I can tell you right now, it's Lee plus 152 is your underdog, Maverick minus 196.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to get the autofocus to look here, so I apologize. It's not, there we go. It's still losable. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, I think Maverick should probably win, but it's hardly a slam dunk, right? So, yeah, there's just a very managed expectations, I think, in either direction at this point.
As we record this, Luke, to kick off the week of 296, do you expect any 298, excuse me, Anaheim, California this Saturday? Do you expect any fight week fireworks? We've had a particularly robust amount of that lately with Sean Strickland, Colby Covington, and a lot of the extra chaos that has formed podcast discussions. With the powers that be on this card, do you see anything coming up this week?
I think all eyes are going to be on Henry and Merab because they have done the most amount of talking and big promotion. Costa maybe a little bit, but Whittaker doesn't play that game. Neal-Garry's obviously going to be somebody you're going to have to pay attention to, but it's not like Geoff Neal's like a big time trash talker, so I don't think that's going to play a role. And then I do think that you're going to see Ilia just say dismissive shit about Volkanovski, and either he's going to look amazing or he's going to look really effing bad. But this is the bet he has made, BC. No one made him do it. So here we go. It's going to be a big one.
Here we go. Cannot wait. Saturday night, Anaheim, California. I want you to enjoy yourself some elite mixed martial arts fighting. Thank you very much. Hey, guys, this has been Morning Combat. We do things still during this transitional period. That's LT. This is BC.
Now, when you say we do things during this transitional period, do you mean other than crying in the shower or what?
Or door dashing? No. Yeah, we do other things as well, though. Hope to see you guys soon. Luke, anything else you want to tell the fine people on the way?
We're just checking in. Thanks to you guys for being patient. We love you all. We had a good time here today. We'll stop back with some more content, I'm sure, soon enough. And thank you. Thanks to everyone who has sent kind words. Thank you to everyone who has been patient. Thank you to everyone who was watching here. We really appreciate and love you guys. We don't take you for granted. We miss you too. We're excited to, get back going again. And until then, just want to say thanks and we love you.
Look, final question. My wife has said if I don't grow this beard back, she will disown me. It's her preference, but I'm my own man. Is this a bad look going clean shaven at 45?
I actually don't like your beard very much. And that's a very rare thing for me to say. I think you look better this way.
Oh, really? See, I feel very pale like this.
I'm sorry. Do you think growing a beard makes you look not pale? I have terrible news for you.
At least it tricks me there. All right. Thank you, folks. We out of here, though. That's it. That's all we got for you. 298. Enjoy it. Thank you.